I spend way too much time reading expat tax advice on Reddit. And sometimes I'll see a comment with hundreds of upvotes that can literally cost someone thousands of dollars. So today, I'm reacting to real posts from real people, Americans abroad, and showing you what's actually right and what could seriously hurt you. So here's the first one. I was born in the US, but have lived in Canada since I was 14. That is 21 years. I have never filed US taxes. I am thinking about just renouncing my citizenship anyway. Does anyone here have perspective? Okay, so first, this person is not doing anything with bad intentions. They left as a teenager, they built their whole life in Canada, and the idea that the US still wants a tax return from them every year feels surprising. And I get that. But here's the reality. The US requires its citizens to file regardless of where they live or how long they've been gone. 21 years abroad does not change that obligation. Now the good news, because this person has been living and paying taxes in Canada this whole time, there's a very good chance that they owe little to nothing in US tax. And Canada has a tax treaty with the US, so the foreign taxes that they've been paying will likely offset any US tax liability, but they still need to file. Now for the renunciation part, and I hear this a lot. Renouncing US citizenship is a real option, and for some people, it makes complete sense. But you cannot renounce while you have unfiled US tax returns. You have to get compliant first. So renunciation is not just a way out of filing. It's something that you have to do first, and then you could renounce. The path forward for this person is the Streamlined Disclosure Program. It's designed exactly for situations like this. Years of unfiled tax returns, no willful intent for someone living abroad. You can file all 5 years of tax returns under the Streamlined program, even though it only asks for 3, so you could get caught up and be able to say that you're fully compliant, which is actually something that they ask in the renunciation questionnaire. Now let's go to comment 2. I've been freelancing in Portugal for 3 years, getting paid through a Portuguese LLC I set up. My accountant there handles my NHR taxes and says I'm fully covered. I assumed that meant my US obligations were handled as well. I just found out that's not the case. Apparently I owe FBAR filings for all 3 years and possibly need to report the LLC. Is this as bad as it sounds? So the good news first. There are programs in place to help people just like you. Every year, we help hundreds of people with similar issues. So let's unpack it because there are actually 2 separate problems here. The first is the assumption that local compliance equals US compliance. It does not, ever. Your Portuguese tax accountant is doing their job correctly. They're handling your Portuguese tax filing obligations. But that doesn't mean that they are doing anything about your US filing requirements, because that's not what they were hired to do. These are completely 2 separate systems, and you need someone from each side to cover that. And by the way, if you're looking for someone to cover both sides, they rarely exist, unless you want to pay an arm and a leg and go to the Big 4, because many companies out there do not handle both. We happen to handle both, but really what we do is we manage the process and we work with a local tax firm in each country to handle the local obligations. The second issue is the LLC. A US citizen owning a foreign company triggers its own set of US reporting requirements, along with your personal tax return and the FBAR. So if you own over 50% of a foreign company, which it sounds like she does, you have to file the Form 5471 every year with your personal tax return. This is one of the most commonly missed obligations that we see, and it's costly. There's $10,000 fines. Now, is this as bad as it sounds? Honestly, it depends on how you handle it from here. 3 years of unfiled tax returns and FBARs with no willful intent coming forward proactively is a very different situation than being found by the IRS. The Streamlined Disclosure Program exists specifically for situations like this. Penalties that people worry about are largely aimed at people that are knowingly hiding assets and money, and not people that genuinely did not understand their obligation. And this is the point of being non-willful. The worst thing that this person could do right now is to keep on waiting. Now let's go to the last one. It's a bit different. I am an American teacher teaching at a foreign university. I have a long-term contract. I'm abroad from January to May. I come back to the US for the summer doing unpaid research from roughly June to September. Then I go back again in September. I have no US income. Do I pass the Bona Fide Residence test? So this person actually gave us a lot of detail, which I appreciate. So let me walk through what matters here. The bona fide residence test is really about where your life is actually rooted. Your housing, your local ties, your established presence in a foreign country. A long-term foreign resident looks very different from someone who is temporary working abroad while their real life remains in the US. Now, this person looks like a strong bona fide residence candidate. They have a long-term faculty contract and they come back to the US for the summer, but then they return abroad. That is not someone on temporary assignment. That is someone whose life is rooted in another country. The key question I would want to dig into is whether they have permanent housing abroad, a place that they genuinely call their home base year-round, where they have their belongings, where they have their doctors. Things like that actually make a very compelling picture. Now, the contrast to that classic case is someone who does not pass the bona fide residence test. A corporate employee who was sent abroad for a 1 or 2 year assignment, but they keep their house in the US, their whole family is in the US, and really their whole life is in the US. They are just temporarily working overseas. That foreign country was never really home, and that person was never really a bona fide resident, no matter how many days they spend abroad. But that does not necessarily mean that they are out of options. If they spend 330 days outside the US in a 12-month period, they may still qualify for the foreign income exclusion through the physical presence test. Now, that is why this question genuinely needs a professional. So, 3 very different situations, but honestly the same underlying pattern. Someone who left the US young and assumed that time took care of their obligations. Someone who built a real business abroad and then trusted their local accountant to cover everything, not realizing that the US operates on a completely separate track. And then someone that's doing everything right, asking the right questions, but in a place where the answer genuinely requires more than just a forum thread. None of these people were trying to cheat the system. They were just working with incomplete information. And that's the thing about expat taxes. The gap between what most people assume and what the rules actually say is wide enough to be genuinely costly, especially when you have a foreign company involved, or years of unfiled returns, unfiled FBARs, or residency situation that could be complicated. If any of these situations sound close to yours, the move is to get clarity sooner rather than later, and the path forward is always more manageable than it looks from the outside. I've been Shinzo Villamina, CPA, founder of Online Taxman. Link is in the description if you need help. Thanks.